Okay. Go ahead, Matt.
Hi, my name is Matt Cost, and I'm here tonight with Phyllis Gobbell and Aimee Barrett and their collaboration on the book Audible version of Pursuit in Provence. Phyllis is the writer of this, and her latest manuscript is Treachery in Tuscany, which is the third in the Jordan Mayfair mystery series that began with this book back in 2015. The book we will be and will continued with Secrets and Shamrocks in 2016. She also co-authored 2 crime books based on high-profile murders in Nashville, An Unfinished Canvas with Mike Glasgow, and A Season of Darkness with Doug Jones. She was interviewed on Discovery ID's Deadly Sins, discussed the murder case in An Unfinished Canvas. Her narratives, Lost Innocence, was published in the anthology Masters of True Crime and is now available as an audiobook. She has received awards in both fiction and nonfiction, including Tennessee's Individual Artist Literary Award. An associate professor of English at Nashville State Community College, she teaches writing and literature. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Phyllis?
No, that sounds like not me, but I think that's fine.
That's plenty enough. And the narrator of the Audible is Aimee Barrett, who is a classical radio producer and assistant program director, as well as announcer. She's also an actress, a narrator, and a college professor of philosophy. She grew up in New Orleans and Atlanta, but now lives in Portland, Oregon, with her husband and 2 silly Shih Tzus. So that's then. Did you want to add anything to that, Aimee?
I think that that's plenty as well. Thank you so much.
Okay. At this point, I will turn it over to Aimee and Phyllis to have a conversation about the book.
Thank you, Matt, and hello, Aimee.
Hi.
I've been so excited to meet you. I've been listening to the audiobook and really wanted to meet the person behind the voice. So it's great. Thank you for having this chat with me today, and we can talk about our mutual project.
Well, thank you for creating such a wonderful character. Jordan is a delight. And the further I went, I read through the book a couple of times before I even started working on it. And the more I got into her conversations and her relationships and the way she thinks about her family, but also her friends, she's a wonderful, wonderful character, lots of depth. And I want to hear how you came up with Jordan Mayfair, because she's quite a critter, quite a person.
How did I come up with her? Well, I guess I just imagined her. She's not anyone that I've ever met, but I tried to make her very different from me. Because it's first person narration, Jordan's telling the story. I think sometimes when you're writing in the I voice, it's tempting to become that person and try to write your own thoughts. And I wanted to make her very different. So she's tall, I'm short. She has auburn hair. She has 5 children. She's Catholic. She's an architect. She's very different from me. And I guess the only way in which we're alike is that she likes to make things right that are wrong. And I do too, if I can, but she's more successful in doing that than I am. I have to say, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I'm also pretty short. Jordan is taller than both of us. I think you and I both share her curiosity, that she's curious about everything. And of course, she's a Southerner, like both of us are as well. So yeah, a lot of differences, but I also related a lot to her as well.
I have to say how much I appreciate the way you narrated the whole book. I was concerned. I was anxious because there are a lot of French phrases in there, and I was afraid that perhaps the narrator wouldn't get all of that right. But I was especially concerned that Jordan have the right voice, because she's a Southerner, as you said, and I didn't want her to have a deep Southern drawl. Yet I knew that she needed to have some hint of being Southern. And you just did it perfectly. After a few lines, I said, this is Jordan's voice. It's Jordan. That's Jordan. And you just had the cadence, and it was exactly like Jordan should be.
Well, that makes me feel wonderful, and I know, you know, as a writer, you have a voice in your head, and I realized I can never be that. I can never be the exact voice that you hear, or that you heard when you were writing. But I'm so glad that it matched what you were hoping for. Um,
Mhm.
One of the things I loved about this book, and whenever people are listening to this, I did record this, I did produce this when we were all still on lockdown during COVID year, and it was a wonderful travelogue. That, in addition to a mystery and a romance, she's traveling through Provence and through the south of France, and it feels like you're just traveling along with her, because you're so good at describing the light and the food and the buildings, of course, because she's an architect. You must have been to Provence. You must have traveled yourself pretty extensively.
Yes, I have. I've been there, and I appreciate that. I don't know how I would have tried. I don't know that I would have even attempted to to write a book about a place like that, and unless I had traveled there. And so I've been to Provence twice, and I've been to Ireland and to Tuscany for the other books, and so I enjoy doing that. I guess I'll do some more when I can travel again, but that's an important part of it. One thing I wanted to say was also that I appreciate was the way you did the voices, because wasn't just Jordan, but the other voices. I've listened to audiobooks where the narrator just does too much, just tries too hard to sound like a man or a child. And you just had those, just the slightest nuances that characterized these characters, and I appreciated that so much.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. I'm an avid listener. I love listening to audiobooks. And like you, it sounds like when there's so much distinction, and I feel like someone's putting on something, it takes me out of the story. I want distinction. I want to hear different voices, but I don't want to be pulled away and think, oh, that doesn't sound like a man. Why is she doing that?
Mhm.
But I saw in your characters, and again, I'm projecting, I saw people in my family and people that I went to college with. And so Felicity, for example, I haven't even told this friend of mine this, but Felicity's voice is modeled after one of my best friends, Constance. That I heard Felicity immediately, and she doesn't sound that different from me, but a little bit. Her voice is just a little bit higher, and she talks just a little bit like this. And Millie is very much like a woman I knew in Minnesota when I was living there. And so her voice is a little bit different, not over the top, but just a little different, so that there's a little distinction, but not a caricature. All of your characters are good people, and they deserve to be treated that way with their own voices. But I hear you. I don't want to be taken out of the story either. I like to be told a story, but not to be acted with a story, especially when I'm listening, because it takes me out of the story immediately.
Well, you are a real professional. What exactly is the process that you go through when you're narrating a book?
Well, as I mentioned, I read your book twice first, and I went through all of the major characters. Especially with a mystery, there's often big surprises with characters. And you don't want to get to the end and find out, oh my goodness, this person's had this accent the entire book and it wasn't mentioned until the end. Or, oh my goodness, this person turns out to be a very different kind of person than we expected. So I go through and I make lots of notes. I also, I perform with a tablet. And so I color code every person with their own dialect, with their own dialogue. For each individual person has a different color. In the case of a book like this, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of French pronunciation, I had separate colors for those. I'm from New Orleans, and some of that I already have, the French pronunciation, although it's a very unique kind of French pronunciation because I'm from New Orleans. But my husband speaks French. He speaks fluent French. And so I would color code those and go and ask him for pronunciations of all of those before I even started. So I would read through twice, and then I would go through each chapter one by one and remember, okay, here's what's happening here. And sometimes it's also a matter of leaving, if you can, little narrative breadcrumbs in early chapters about what's happening, what's going to happen with later chapters. And I don't want to give anything away with this book because there's some big surprises, but there are some breadcrumbs early on that you can go back and go, oh, that was happening there, because you were leaving those literary breadcrumbs as well. But if I hadn't read through the whole book, I wouldn't have realized that you were doing that the whole time. So that's the process. It's pretty involved. It's not just reading a book. It's going through and making sure that you're listening to who the people are, who you have created, the families that you've created. There is one scene that is a picnic in your book that I think was probably the hardest chapter of the entire book. I will tell you that, where there are 5, 6 voices and they're very different and they're very, very rapid. I think I probably produced that chapter 3, 4 times before I was happy with it, because those conversations are just, it's easy to lose. It's easy to if you're listening, and I would go listen to my headphones, and it's easy to miss, wait a minute, who was it that just said that? There's just not enough distinction. Am I hearing from that person or that person? But it was fun. It was a fun challenge.
I just appreciate the care that you took with my characters. How did you get started narrating books?
So this was funny. As mentioned, I've worked in broadcasting for decades, but one of my best friends, who also has worked in broadcasting, is a writer. She began writing about 10 years ago, and her genre at the time was romance. And I'm not a big romance reader. I love mysteries. I love cozy mysteries, but romance wasn't quite my thing. But I started reading hers because she's my best friend. And she was going to this conference that I thought just sounded like a hoot. I thought it sounded like so much fun for the romance writers. And she said, you should try narrating. You're a great storyteller. You've acted, you do some acting. Have you thought about putting all of this together? And so I kind of did it on a lark about 3, 4 years ago and loved it. It's different than any other job I do, including broadcasting. It's much harder than broadcasting in a lot of ways. And I love the challenge of it. And it's just kind of taken off. But I've been narrating for about 3, 4 years now, like I said, and it's always a new chapter, so to speak. It's always a new adventure, even though it's same process, going into the booth and reading through the books and everything. You get to know these characters intimately, just like when you're listening in an audiobook. You feel like you know them. As a producer, it feels that way too. It feels like I know them.
I had not read my book for a while because had other books and other projects. And so it's been such fun for me to go back and listen to this. And I think you just did a marvelous job. I'm so pleased with it. And is there anything else you'd like to say about the book?
Jordan is wonderful, and her adventure is so much fun and so exciting, and there's so many turns. And as I mentioned, it's an escape. It's not just a plot. It's not just a narrative story. It's an escape to this incredible place. And I also love how much she's connected to her friends, her family, her uncle, and her children back home still, who are still trying to get a hold of her. I am curious to know, are you planning to travel again and to write another episode in Jordan Mayfair?
Yes, I'd like to think that I will. You know, we have been limited during the pandemic, and so I don't have any immediate plans, but I don't want Jordan to go to rest. I want to continue this, and as I said, I feel like I have to go somewhere to really get the feel of it. I've thought the 3 books that I have are all in Europe, and I have thought about um, making the next book in Savannah, Georgia, because that's where she's from. And I think, you know, it might be that I could come up with something where she stays at home, but still has some of the same adventures. And maybe Paul Broussard might come over to visit her. He's the love interest, of course, as you know. So I've been thinking about that. But yeah, I do plan to do this. I just have not been able to because of the pandemic.
Well, thank you for creating such a wonderful character. She
Well,
was so much fun. She was so much
well,
fun. I really, really loved her.
thank you for the wonderful job that you did. And I guess if we don't have anything else, I'll just turn it back to Matt. And thanks again, Aimee, for having this chat with me.
Absolutely.
Well, I think the two of you have said it all. So thank you, Aimee, and thank you, Phyllis. And just so that you know, the Audible version of Pursuit in Provence is available in audiobook as well as other formats, pretty much wherever books are sold. So thank you both for coming.
Thank you.